Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Lindsay Reiser. Right now on Morning News Now, under pressure, President Biden back at the White House. While in Afghanistan, thousands of Americans anxiously try to get out. Will Taliban forces clear the way?
Ultimately, it's going to be up to the Taliban to show the rest of the world who they are and how they intend to proceed. The track record has not been good.
The latest situation on the ground and the fallout here at home, including what the CIA knew in the weeks before the Taliban takeover. Magic number, questions about the 8-month time frame for a COVID booster shot. A look at the science behind the timing and the role new variants could play on how effective that third dose may be. Nations in need, the U.S. and United Nations sending help to Haiti after that devastating 7.2 magnitude quake. Hospitals now on the verge of being overrun with patients. The biggest challenge facing relief workers and rescuers as the death toll continues to rise. And too good to be true, a warning about scammers sliding into your DMs. It all starts with a flattering proposal for aspiring influencers, how they're using Instagram to target the Gen Z crowd, and the telltale tip-off that should be a warning sign that it's too good to be true. Nobody's trying to slide into my DMs,
no,
but I guess that's
we must
good.
Not be influencers.
No, exactly. 2,500. Anyway, good to have you guys with us. We've got a busy morning here. Savannah's on assignment, and we're going to begin in Afghanistan this morning, where frantic evacuations by countries around the world are speeding up right now. The White House says more than 3,200 Americans have been evacuated so far. There are plans to take in 20,000 Afghans who are candidates for special immigrant visas. And National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the process would continue until the end of the month.
The Taliban have informed us that they are prepared to provide the safe passage of civilians to the airport, and we intend to hold them to that commitment. What we are finding is that we are getting people through the gate, we are getting them lined up, and we are getting them on planes, but this is an hour-by-hour issue.
And despite those calls for safe passage, there are reports of some Afghans that are trying to flee the country only to be turned away at Taliban checkpoints and in some cases even beaten and whipped. The White House says they have warned the Taliban of the consequences if they fail to live up to their promises.
The Taliban's top leaders have now returned to Afghanistan, including their exiled co-founder Mullah Baradar, who touched down last night. Earlier in the day, the militant group held its first press conference, trying to strike a conciliatory tone. The Taliban said it was not looking for internal or external enemies, that opponents would be forgiven, that they would even respect women's rights, but within what they called the norms of Islamic law. We have a team of correspondents around the world covering all the latest developments. Ali Arouzi, Mike Memoli, and Megan Fitzgerald. Good morning to all of you. Ali, let's start with you. First of all, in Afghanistan, how are evacuations progressing today? And is the Taliban actually granting safe passage for those civilians who want to try and leave?
Good morning, Joe. Well, the U.S. is certainly trying to pick up the pace of evacuations. Every day they're trying to increase the number of people they can get on flights out of Kabul, while the U.S. military footprint is also increasing at the airport, which should help facilitate a more smooth operation. Now, the airport is currently open for military flight operations, as well as some limited commercial flights. Currently, the U.S. has been ferrying out about 800 or 900 people a day, a mix of American citizens, special immigrant visa applicants, and some third country nationals. But they're hoping to increase that number to over 5,000 people a day. But that also depends on the circumstances on the ground that, as you mentioned, are changing hour by hour. But there are still many American citizens and Afghan allies still stranded in Kabul and other parts of the country, which are now under Taliban rule. Look, the outside perimeter walls of the airport, there are still confusion and chaos with gunfire and sounds of screams of panic of people trying to get out. Taliban gunmen have surrounded the airport. They're checking documents of people trying to reach the airport or get into the airport. So when the Taliban spokesman says that anyone who wants to leave the country is free to do so, it doesn't really ring true. And of course, there are Afghan translators and other visa holders who've helped the U.S. that are trying to reach the airport, but they're just simply too scared to break cover because they're not sure what will happen if they fall into the hands of the Taliban. At best, they could be detained. At worst, who knows what.
Mike, let's talk about how we got here. NBC News has learned that in recent weeks, the CIA had been warning about a potentially rapid takeover by the Taliban and total collapse of the Afghan military and government. But we don't know if that message ever got to the White House, right?
Yeah, that's right, Joe. And really, the Washington blame game is in full swing at this point. You have military officials saying they wanted to begin evacuating our Afghan partners as early as May, but they were prevented from doing so by the White House. You have the intelligence community saying they were shocked at the speed at which the military completed that drawdown within Afghanistan. That was mostly done by July. It contributed to our lack of understanding of just how quickly the Taliban could take over the country. You have the State Department blaming Congress for the delay in processing these visas. Now, as it relates to the intelligence and what the president may or may not have seen, we heard Jake Sullivan yesterday step aside from that question, but also saying he was not going to engage in the same kind of finger pointing. Take a listen.
I'm not actually familiar with the intelligence assessments you're describing, but I also don't want to get into specific intelligence products. And one thing I will not do from this podium or anywhere else is talk about what a different component of the interagency did or didn't do, because from my perspective, we are one team with one mission, trying to execute and do so in the best interests of our interests and values.
Now, remember, just a month ago, the president himself said he hadn't seen intelligence that suggested the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan could happen so quickly. But even if it had, what has been the chief argument from administration officials now to justify the president's decision? That the Afghan government was unable to stand up for itself. It's likely, based on conversations I've been having, even if the president had seen that intelligence, it would have only confirmed in his mind why the United States should be withdrawing from Afghanistan.
So, Megan, it's not just the U.S. grappling with the crisis. Our allies are too. The British Parliament has been debating this crisis in Afghanistan this morning amid plans to take in 20,000 refugees there. What more can you tell us about that?
Joe, that's exactly right. So the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, saying that they will take in some 20,000 Afghan refugees, but over the course of several years. Within the first year, he's saying that they'll bring in about 5,000 refugees, prioritizing, of course, women, girls, children, as well as those who are more susceptible to crimes and punishment by the Taliban. And there's some pushback from the opposition party saying that that's not enough. 20,000 isn't enough. They need to look at upwards of 50,000, and it needs to be done a lot quicker, saying that they have a moral obligation to the people of Afghanistan. But members of parliament say that they need to make sure that they have the structures in place across the country to make sure that they can accommodate these people, which is why the plan at this moment is to progressively bring in people over the course of time, Joe.
Ali, we actually heard from the Taliban in their first press conference yesterday. They made a lot of promises. How is their attempt at a conciliatory message being received? Do people in Afghanistan actually believe it?
Well, Joe, the Taliban have never really been known for their veracity. In 1996, after they won the civil war, they made promises of peace and stability and delivered tyranny and volatility instead. And I don't think too many Afghans are taking them at their word this time round. They promised in a press conference yesterday to honor women's rights, but only within the framework of Sharia law, which in essence discriminates against women from a human rights perspective. Under the rule of the Taliban in the 90s, women had no rights at all. And the Taliban ideology remains the same today. So many are very skeptical about their words and will be watching their actions instead. Look, already you're seeing much less women on the streets of Kabul and other places in Afghanistan. They have to cover themselves up. They can't wear makeup or show their hair. Freedoms for everyone in Afghanistan are going to diminish, but particularly for women. So people are not watching their words. They're going to be watching their actions in the coming days, weeks, and months.
Mike, President Biden has endured heavy criticism in recent days, staying quiet for a long time before eventually speaking out earlier this week, defending his decision to withdraw troops. He's back at the White House. He returned last night. That's why you're there. Can we expect to hear anything from him later today?
Well, the focus, Joe, at least on paper at the White House today, is on the coronavirus, the pandemic. We expect to hear from the COVID response team and other public health officials this morning. And then the president is scheduled to deliver remarks this afternoon. Those remarks we expect to be focused on the recommendation coming from the White House now that Americans do receive a third COVID vaccine booster shot within 8 months of their last dose. But that would also be an opportunity for the president to provide an update on the situation in Afghanistan. We also know the president is going to be sitting down for a one-on-one interview tonight. The first time, really, we can expect him to be grilled by the public about these decisions he's been making.
No doubt, a lot of questions that will be directed toward him. All right, Megan, Mike, and Allie, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
8 states are now banning local governments from imposing their own mask mandates as hundreds of thousands of students go back to learning in person. And some schools are already seeing COVID outbreaks. In Pickens County, South Carolina, school has only been in session for 9 days, but now more than 600 kids are in quarantine. And in Broward County, Florida, the mask mandate has become so politicized that the district is going to be sanctioned by the state. It's still unclear what the punishment will be. NBC News correspondent Heidi Presbilla is in Pickens County. NBC News Now correspondent Dasha Burns is live in Broward. So, Heidi, there are nearly 24 schools in Pickens County. Are these 600 students spread out among them? So this isn't just something we're seeing at 1 or 2 schools. This is more widespread.
This is district-wide, Lindsay, and frankly, the politicians in this state were warned by the doctors, they were warned by the scientists what would happen if they sent children back into these buildings unvaccinated and without masks, and that happened, and it happened in rapid succession. 9 days it took for these schools to see an 100% increase and the positivity rate here, Lindsay. We're already seeing this have a drastic impact on the community as well. I spoke with school officials who said there are 2 teachers who were on ventilators. So extreme cases here. We spoke also with the parents of a young boy who has sickle cell anemia, and he has tried fruitlessly to appeal to the governor, to appeal to state legislatures to please reconsider, given that these mandates were passed at a time when COVID looked to be on the decline. We sat down with him yesterday, and here's what he said.
There's a understanding at this point, at least within schools, that children are going to get sick. They're going to get COVID. And there is a sense of helplessness that there's just nothing that we can do about it.
Helplessness, Lindsay, because in addition to the ban on mask mandates here, this state legislators here decided that students cannot stay in virtual. Not more than 5% of students can stay in virtual long term, Lindsay. So that means despite the fact that they cannot change protocols here, school officials must welcome students back into these buildings on Monday. They have no choice, or else they risk losing funding.
I mean, Heidi, such a difficult spot for parents, particularly parents with kids who have compromised immune systems like the one you spoke with. I mean, you know, what's the choice? Withdraw their kids and do homeschooling. Of course, that's not an option for so many people. Dasha, Broward County is the 6th largest school district in the country. We're talking about more kids going to school there than there are people in the county where Heidi is. How politicized has the mask debate become there in South Florida?
Yeah, Lindsay, this is a big day today for a very big district. As you mentioned, the first day of school should typically be focused on those nerves and the excitement of getting kids back in the classroom, especially after a year and a half of disrupted learning, thinking about how to get those kids caught up. But instead, what I'm hearing from administrators and teachers is that the politics really is distracting from that, because here in Broward County, this district has chosen to institute a mask mandate. The kids going to school behind me today, they're going to be required to wear those masks. That flies in the face of Governor DeSantis's executive order banning mask mandates. And this has become a sometimes bitter and political battle. Just last night, we listened in on a state school board emergency meeting where the superintendent of this district and another district making a similar choice were questioned by state school board members. And Lindsay, it did get political political at times. President Biden was brought up. The debate between President Biden and Governor Ron DeSantis came up, and there were heated public comments on both sides of the debate. But as I'm talking to the folks who are trying to make this happen, make the first day of school happen, and make the rest of the year happen as smoothly as possible, they're saying this political battle is being fought on the backs of these kids. I want you to hear from the school board chair, Dr. Rosalind Osgood, on this. Take a listen.
Nobody's really thinking about the trauma of the students, the trauma of the kids, or the rights of the parents who want masks to be mandated, the parents that are literally afraid of sending their kids to schools where everybody is not masked.
The folks at the district say they are looking at the data. Last week, the state reported more than 31,000 COVID cases among Floridians under the age of 19. But, Lindsay, at this point, the district has been sanctioned. We don't know what those punitive measures will be, but we know that they're coming.
All right, Dasha Burns, Heidi Prisbella, thank you both so much on this back-to-school report. We appreciate it.
The Biden administration is expected to make a key announcement today, a major announcement about coronavirus booster shots. Sources with the CDC tell NBC News federal health officials are expected to recommend that adults should get a third dose of Pfizer or Moderna at least 8 months after they've been fully vaccinated. Now, many are wondering why 8 months? Where does this number come from? NBC News has been digging into that question. Joining us now with the answer is NBC News medical reporter Erica Edwards. So, Erica, you reported that the Israeli Health Ministry posted that vaccines administered to people over age 65 in January now offer just 55% protection against severe illness. So we'll use that as the foundation for our question here. Why 8 months? Why is that the magic number?
Hey, Joe, good morning. You know, that's a great question, and one that I hope that we will get more clarity on. Later this morning, the CDC is expected to release new U.S. data showing vaccine effectiveness since the rollout began. Now, but we already have seen evidence of a dip in immunity, just like you mentioned in Israel, for example. Those who received their first shots 8 months ago, January, are now getting breakthrough infections at higher rates than those who got their shots a few months later, say in April. And that's really the basis right now. That's really all we have to go on until we see this new data later today from the CDC. Joe?
So in America right now, the 7-day average of new cases is up 700% from July. We know it's unvaccinated people who've been largely driving the surge. So how might boosters for people who have already received the vaccine, how might that impact the pandemic?
Yeah, it really is the super contagious Delta variant that's really been driving those cases up since July, especially in areas with really low vaccination rates. Now, boosters could potentially curb transmission, potentially help us avoid the emergence of a new variant. But really, doctors say to make an important difference, a significant difference in this pandemic, people need to get their first shots. It remains true that those who are hospitalized and dying from COVID unvaccinated.
And so do we think the Biden administration here and the federal health officials are basically following Israel's lead here and looking at them as a sort of what's the best path to move forward?
Right. Well, right now, here's where it stands in the U.S. The only group authorized to get that third shot is immune-compromised patients. Now, it's likely if the U.S. recommends additional boosters for other groups, it would likely be those healthcare workers, the elderly, who were first in line for the shots last year. Now, meanwhile, we're having this discussion while we still don't have full FDA approval for any COVID-19 vaccine. That's not expected until sometime next month, Joe.
All right. Erica Edwards, thank you for all your reporting on this. Appreciate it.
The wildfires in California are forcing more people to abandon everything. The biggest one, the Dixie Fire, has grown to nearly 627,000 acres and continues to be a threat as it moves closer to towns. Take a look at this video here from San Jose. You see the sky there completely lit up by the fire. The Dixie Fire is the second largest wildfire in California history, and it is only 31% contained. More than 1,100 buildings have been destroyed. Thousands of people have had to leave their homes. And now another challenge, the Calder fire. It's burning east of Sacramento, and it has been growing, prompting evacuation orders in El Dorado County. At least 6,500 acres have burned.
Cities across the U.S. and world are dealing with a slew of natural disasters, from those fires to flooding and major storm damage this morning.
Yeah, we're going to take a look at the latest with Bill Cairns. Bill, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, guys, because we've been dealing with the fires and everything else. But the first thing that I'll cover is the immediate concerns with these tropical systems. And we do have a little bit of breaking news on Henri that we'll get to in a little bit. But first, let's deal with Tropical Depression Fred. This produced numerous tornadoes over the southeast yesterday, and that is the one moving up into areas of the northeast today. Grace is not going to be much of an issue for the United States, or any issue. Henri, stay tuned. I'm going to get into that in a second. So first thing first, you notice on the radar, a lot of heavy rain moving up through the Appalachians from West Virginia through Pennsylvania and New York. We are going to experience some flash flooding today. We have about 24 million people that are in flash flood watches, primarily from Richmond northward. Notice that the I-95 corridor, the big cities are kind of left out of this. This is more interior sections of New England. And the rainfall totals 1 to 3 inches in Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont. Isolated areas could see up to 5 inches, and the heaviest rain tonight and tomorrow will move up into areas of New England. And I mentioned yesterday we had tornadoes. We expect possibility of those this afternoon. D.C., Baltimore, Harrisburg, isolated tornadoes are possible with this storm system. Now let's get to Henri, and this is going to be an interesting forecast. So right now it's kind of spinning harmlessly south of Bermuda at 65-mile-per-hour winds, so it's almost up to a hurricane strength. The National Hurricane Center does believe it will become a hurricane in the days ahead. It takes a turn up the East Coast and then maybe just off the East Coast. Notice that Nantucket and Cape Cod is barely on the into that cone of uncertainty. There's definitely going to be a rip current risk this upcoming weekend. Dangerous waves will be at the coastline of all areas in New England to Cape Cod up through Maine. Beach erosion will be possible for some of these large waves. And a few of our computer models, including our American computer model, actually takes this storm into Rhode Island and Massachusetts, where our European computer model is farther off the coast. So this bears watching, and this could change as we go throughout the next couple of days. And here's the computer models. These little spaghetti lines show us the possibilities, and notice about 3 or 4 of them are to the left towards Cape Cod and Massachusetts. And that would possibly be a hurricane near Cape Cod this upcoming weekend. Being only 4 days away, that's a pretty significant change in the forecast. And I'll end with Grace, because this was the storm that was near Haiti and Jamaica yesterday. This should be a hurricane just south of Cancun tomorrow, and then possibly making a second landfall as a hurricane north of Veracruz. But guys, today we'll worry about Fred, and then this weekend in New England, it's not out of question a hurricane could be very close to the coast.
Yeah, we know you'll stay on top of it. All right, Bill, thanks for the mornings. Appreciate it.
Rescue teams are working around the clock in Haiti, digging through the debris left behind by that magnitude 7.2 earthquake, searching for survivors. International relief efforts are ramping up to help with the island's most immediate needs.
Yeah, in the U.S., we know that the Pentagon has announced a joint task force to help, and the United Nations set aside $8 million in relief. But damage to the island expected to cost billions. NBC News correspondent Gabe Gutierrez got an inside look at an aid mission and is in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, with the latest. Gabe?
Good morning. The U.S. Coast Guard will continue its rescue missions this morning. Their choppers will be taking off from this airport behind me. But yesterday, we traveled on one of those missions just moments after Tropical Storm Grace added insult to injury. The desperation in Haiti is growing. As if the earthquake weren't enough, these survivors just endured Tropical Storm Grace. After punishing wind and rain blew through overnight, the U.S. Coast Guard rushed in, part of a massive international effort. One of the toughest parts about this relief operation is getting supplies to the people that most need it. Many roads are shut down, cutting off entire communities. It's a challenge to get into many parts of Haiti right now. Flight mechanic Savannah Brewer from Alabama has served for 7 years.
It's extremely difficult emotionally to see these people and all their suffering and all of their injuries.
We land in Lake High, the same town where just yesterday we'd seen desperate earthquake survivors in the stifling heat hoping to be evacuated. Now, we can still feel the rain falling. The tropical storm just moved through, and we're about to find out just how extensive the damage was. this young child with a broken leg. He and other patients had been waiting for days, some even younger, in their mother's arms. The hospital overwhelmed.
They're significantly overrun and under-resourced right now. So med supplies and personnel support is critical.
The wounded are carefully loaded into the chopper, one by one.
We had a lot of building collapses, so that was the majority of what we've been seeing is a lot of broken bones.
Petty Officer Brewer cares for the young boy. He speaks not a word. His eyes tell you everything.
Some of these kids that we've seen, they've had buildings come down on their parents and they're all alone, and it really is just so heartbreaking.
UNICEF estimates that the earthquake impacted 1.2 million people here in Haiti, half of them children. Lindsay and Joe.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, thank you for your reporting. Let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Yeah, we're going to go now to Claudio Levanga, who's joining us from Rome. Claudio, good morning.
Good morning, Lindsay. Good morning, Joe. Well, the Australian airline company Qantas said that all its workers must be vaccinated against COVID-19. Pilots, cabin crews and airport staff will have to get both doses by mid-November, and all other workers have got until next March to get fully vaccinated. By doing that, Qantas has become the first global airline to make vaccination mandatory for its staff. Essentially, it's telling its workers, well, you want to keep your job? Get a jab. And talking about vaccinations, Pope Francis has issued a new video message in which he said that getting vaccinated is an act of love. Now, the pontiff got fully vaccinated back in February and has encouraged ever since everyone to do exactly the same. During the video message, the pontiff also said that vaccination is a simple but profound way of promoting the common good and caring for each other, especially the most vulnerable. And last but not least, if anyone is afraid of snakes, they should really look away now, because we're going back to Australia, in the city of Sydney, where a woman was shopping in the supermarket and a grocery store when she came face to face with a 10-foot python who sneaked out of the shelves. Fortunately, the woman happened to be, I mean, how lucky is that, a snake rescuer. So she knew exactly what to do, which is not what me and you guys will have done, which is scream and run for your lives. No, she kept the cool and she put the python in a bag and then she released them safely into the bushland. Now, for the news you can use, a service of the day, now you know exactly what to do when you come face to face with a 10-foot python in a supermarket, which happens, of course, every day, guys.
What are the odds? Is there a snake rescuer in the grocery store? Anyway, oh, look, look, how lucky we are.
I'd be like, we're getting takeout tonight? Absolutely not.
Yeah,
Claudio,
exactly.
Thank you.
Time for the good talker. First, he was Mayor Pete, then presidential candidate Pete, Secretary Pete. Now he's a dad. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg and his husband Chasten announced that they have become parents. Buttigieg tweeted, "The process isn't done yet, and we're thankful for the love, support, and respect for our privacy that has been offered to us. We can't wait to share more soon." Buttigieg, of course, made history earlier this year when he became the first openly gay cabinet member to be confirmed by the Senate. Obviously, more information to come, but very exciting for them. They've long expressed interest in being parents.
Yeah, I'm thinking after all of his jobs in the whirlwind last few years, maybe he's used to no sleep. Maybe. This still might be pretty challenging.
If not, you better get ready.
Exactly. It's coming.
Yep.
All right, Joe, thanks. Many U.S. veterans have expressed concern and a lot of frustration over the rapid collapse of Afghanistan. NBC News spoke with a pararescueman who served there and is looking back at his time fighting the Taliban.
My name is Jimmy Settle, and I was a pararescueman in Afghanistan. Whenever somebody was hurt, we were going on to go get them and get them out. I was hungry to make a difference. 2 weeks into the deployment, we were tasked to support an operation called Bulldog Bite. We're flying over the coordinates for the Americans who were hurt, and we call over the radio, "Hey, pop your smoke so we can identify you." And I saw 3 muzzle flashes. And I immediately knew what was going on, like we were being shot at.
The bullet struck the bottom of the aircraft, fragmented, and then part of the piece went right underneath my helmet here. It's the AK-47 hole. It almost got me.
While I was in Afghanistan, I got credited with 38 saves and 28 assists. And I received a Purple Heart. The very last sentence of the pararescueman's creed: "These things we do so that others may live." It's a creed that I still hold close to my heart. I'm of many minds on the current events and the way they're unfolding in Afghanistan. My first thought is I'm happy we're no longer sending young, healthy bodies to be chewed up in the machine of war. However, I am really sad for the folks who are in Afghanistan and the way they're being treated. I saw a picture today of a Taliban guy wearing the helmet I wore in Afghanistan, and that was when I wore it, it was a very special, very unique helmet. So it's like, wow, how did that happen? I'm wrestling with a lot of emotions. On the other hand of the coin, I also kind of see it as like, well, the government of Afghanistan fled the country and left it to the Taliban. And my hope is that they step up and care for their people in a little bit more modern way than they were before the 2001 attacks. I can understand why people would feel that this is an all for nothing, but it was definitely not for nothing, because we were able to do some of the things that we set out to do. We killed Osama bin Laden, and he was the face of terror. I'm grateful for the security that we feel here at home today.
As you just heard from that Purple Heart recipient, this is a complicated issue for many veterans. Yes, some are grateful for what the U.S. military accomplished in Afghanistan. But another Afghanistan veteran shared a very different sentiment with NBC News, saying he feels a wide range of emotions from angry to sad, even embarrassed. Let's bring in NBC News senior digital politics reporter Alex Seitz-Wald, who spoke to some veterans, and former CIA analyst and Afghanistan veteran Matt Zeller. He's the author of Watches Without Time, An American Soldier in Afghanistan. Alex, I want to start with you. Tell us more about some of the strong emotions you heard from those veterans that you've been speaking with.
Well, it's a whirlwind, and a lot of them are still processing this in real time. There's relief that the mission is over, but there's also this anger that it ended this way. There's sadness and heartbreak for the Afghan people, and there's some embarrassment for the country and a sense of betrayal from the military and political leaders who kept this conflict going for so long, only for it to end this way. A lot of people that I spoke with said they realized years ago during their deployment that this mission was kind of futile, but to just see the gains erased so quickly is heartbreaking. Take a listen to Richard Allen Smith, who served with the 82nd Airborne.
To be frank, this sucks. It's shameful what we're seeing on TV, but again, like these mistakes were made a long time ago. It's not something that happened this week as if everything just suddenly fell unexpectedly, and ultimately this is the wages of empire. Having this on our conscience, this is what the price you have to pay for, global gallivanting and democracy building and whatnot that our force was never meant to do.
So, for so many Americans, it was easy to ignore that these wars were going on. And what I heard from a lot of veterans is now as this ends and we're all paying attention to Afghanistan, we all need to reckon with the fallout, not just the people who served there.
Matt, that veteran who we just heard from, he described the situation in Afghanistan as shameful, said mistakes were made a long time ago. I know you have been trying to sound the alarm for months now, for a long time, to try and get our allies out of Afghanistan. And I know you've been thinking a lot about the people who helped you while you were serving there, haven't you?
Yeah, this has been actually a mission I've been working on for the better part of the last 8 years. And he's right. The failure of this started years ago. The reason why we're facing this massive evacuation now is because of the Trump administration and the Obama administration. They failed to properly process the special immigration visa applicants of, at this point now, some 80,000 people in a fair amount of time. Just to give you an idea, it currently, up until the collapse of the Afghan government, was taking on average 800 days for someone to get through that application process. To put that in perspective, we could build, fly, land, and operate a rover on Mars faster than we could get one of these people their visas. We've been facing this crisis for a very long time, and that's why we were trying to tell people that the evacuation needed to begin months ago before we got to this very moment.
Alex, I know many veterans are echoing what we're hearing from Matt there. What are vets like Richard Allen Smith, who you spoke with, hoping the Biden administration will do now?
Yeah, getting out the interpreters and the other Afghans who helped is just universal. I heard it from everyone I spoke with. And the time pressure is very real right now. I talked to one veteran who had been trying to get an interpreter out in Kabul. The guy had 4 children, and they thought they were close to getting him a visa, and then he went dark about 3 days ago, and they just don't know, is he hiding? Has he been captured? So there's a huge urgency to try to get these people out. Take a look at a little bit more of what Richard Allen Smith had to say.
I know there's a lot of red tape, but let's cut it. Cut the red tape. Get our folks, both Americans and the partners we worked with whose lives are now in danger, on those birds, get them out of the country, and we can figure out the paperwork later. Those people literally risk their lives every day they came to work on a U.S. installation or even answered their door to a U.S. commander or service member. We owe it to them to get them out, and our fellow citizens owe it to them to welcome them with open arms and not engage in any kind of xenophobia like you've seen a lot on the right and frequently see on the right. We need to get those people out and welcome them here as new Americans.
And I talked to probably 20 service members who had served in Afghanistan, and this was universal across the board. Conservatives, liberals, everyone agreed that we have to get these people out and welcome them back into the country who served there.
Matt, we're tight on time, and I know this isn't an easy answer, but I mean, how right now does the government safely get these folks to the U.S.?
It's not popular, but we need to recommit the bulk of our military to go in and forcefully get them. I'm going to say this over again. The Taliban are terrified of us. They don't want to get back into a shooting war. They want us to leave. We should be telling them that we're going to go as soon as we take every single one of our people, and that we're going to get every single city, not just Kabul. Let's be very clear. There are some 50,000 people right now outside of Kabul that we know of that are on lists that we are tracking and have been for years that need evacuation. They're now having to do some heroic stuff to get there. As we were going on live, I just got a message from someone who made it to Kabul from a city called Baghdad. That is 800 kilometers away from Kabul. These people are doing everything they can to stay alive. We should be going in and just trying to get them. They shouldn't be having to take that risk.
Wow. All right. Matt, Alex, thank you both so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Thank you. Time for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
We're going to go to Bertha Coombs joining us now. Good morning, Bertha.
Hey, good morning, Lindsay, Joe. MasterCard is phasing out the use of magnetic strips on its credit cards and debit cards over the next decade as it shifts towards more secure methods such as chips and contactless payments. The magnetic stripe technology dates back to the 1960s. MasterCard says the transition is going to begin in Europe in 2024, where chip cards are already widely used, and in 2027 here in the U.S., where apparently we're a little behind the 8 ball when it comes to adoption. YouTube, meantime, is introducing a few new features to help improve the search experience. The biggest tool may be the ability to view chapters right from the search results page. YouTube has allowed users to break longer videos into separate chapters so that viewers can quickly find what they're specifically looking for, but they were only visible when you clicked on the video itself. Now they'll appear alongside search results with a timestamped thumbnail for each section. And Nissan unveiling the latest generation of its Z sports car that's a blast from the past. It'll come with a gas-powered engine and manual transmission. Nissan executives say that's the way fans want it. A version with an automatic transmission will also be offered. The new Z will go on sale in the U.S. next spring. Nissan has said it will offer electric versions of all of its models by the early part of the next decade. You know, fans of standard really have a hard time finding those cars these days.
Yeah, I'm imagining a whole generation of young people learning the stick shift like I had to do when I was young, and my heart feels for that.
Right? Yeah. Nobody wants to see people what that looked like.
No, it's not pretty. All right, thank you, Bertha.
Well, from the risks of vaping to the benefits of being a good listener, it's time for your weekly checkup.
NBC News senior medical correspondent Dr. John Torres joins us now with some of the health headlines you may have missed in the last few days. Good morning, Dr. John. So let's start off with this new study shows even when teens try to quit e-cigarettes, they are still having trouble. What more are we learning about the dangers of vaping?
And Joe, the main point about the studies, it shows that quitting vaping is harder than it looks. You know, vaping was touted when it first came out as an alternative to smoking, that it was benign and you could easily quit it. Well, this study is showing that's not that easy. As a matter of fact, they looked at over 14,000 high schoolers and middle schoolers. It turned out more than half of them had tried to quit, and more than half of them had tried to quit many times. As a matter of fact, the average number of attempts was over 5. And so what are the doctor's orders here? What does all this mean? Well, basically, it means that you need to know that your teen is vaping, and talk to your teen about vaping. And sometimes it's hard to tell whether they're doing it or not. So simply ask them a question. Are you vaping? And if they are, get them help to quit, because it's something that's going to be tough for them and something they're probably not going to be doing on their own. But again, we're finding out more and more that vaping is not the thing we thought it was, and it's turning out to be more problematic than we thought it was as well, Joe.
Certainly sometimes billed as like a cessation device, but comes with its own host of problems. All right, John, I can't wait to tell my wife about this. This is why you need to listen to me. Having someone listen to you can actually improve brain health. So by actually listening to somebody, you could be doing a lot more for your loved ones than you may think. Can you tell us more about that?
Exactly, Lindsay, and that's what the study shows. It's part of the Framingham study, which has been going on for decades, and they looked at over 2,000 people in their 40s and 50s, and they looked at MRIs, and they did cognitive tests, meaning tests of their brain function, and they found out that having someone to listen to actually slows the aging of your brain. As a matter of fact, somebody who didn't have anybody to listen to or didn't have that many people to listen to that often ended up having brains that were 4 years older than those that had people who listened to them. So remember, it's not always about being a good listener. It's fantastic if you are, but at the same time, you need somebody to listen to you as well. So doctor's orders here. You want to go ahead and you want to make sure that you have social connections, because those are extremely vital. Even if you don't have them right now in the pandemic, physically, virtual social connections are important, having somebody to talk to. And then if you feel like you need some help, if you need help getting social connections, or you need help because you're thinking you have issues with your brain function, please get that help, especially right now with all the things that are going on. Getting that help is extremely important. But again, Lindsay, main point, make sure somebody listens to you.
Doctor's orders.
Doctor's orders. There you go. All right, Dr. John, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Companies are still struggling to adjust to a changing workplace post-pandemic. For a lot of employers, the challenge comes down to holding on to current employees while also attracting new ones. But the power dynamic has shifted. NBC's Tom Costello explains.
It's being called the Great Resignation. Prompted by the pandemic, millions of Americans reevaluating their lives and moving on. In April and June, record numbers quit their jobs. In San Antonio, Claire Barnett left her consulting job for more work flexibility and time with her kids.
Being home gave me that opportunity to think about it. From a family life balance perspective, we can make different decisions.
Nationwide, employers report a staggering 10.1 million job openings. Even in picturesque Bozeman, Montana, soaring home prices have made it difficult for software company Zoot Enterprises to attract employees. So it's now offering on-site daycare, a cafeteria, fitness programs, physical therapists, and most importantly, flexible working options.
We're seeing employees that really, when they are outside of work, they don't want to be at work. And so we are seeing a pretty significant shift in that, where work is something that we do, but it's not the only thing we do anymore. And their lives really do matter.
That change of mindset is forcing companies big and small to change their return to work approach, even as a new study finds 38% of employees are seeking new jobs right now.
We're seeing more perks around flexibility, different kinds of schedules. But of course, in the end, what many people care about is their compensation, higher wages, bonuses.
A pandemic-forced power shift, employees gaining the upper hand and making lifestyle demands, with employers hoping to keep them happy. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
Over the last few years, scams have evolved from telemarketers calling about your car warranty to scammers targeting people directly with online messages. Now they're trying to take advantage of social media users who want to become influencers, and Gen Z is the main target. Our very own Savannah Sellers has the story.
Hey, we think you'd be great. We're looking for an ambassador for our company.
They usually comment on one of my photos first.
say, hey, you look perfect for like a project I'm doing or something.
Maybe you've gotten this message on Instagram. Accounts reaching out asking you to be a brand ambassador, often offering a discount code for products in exchange for a post on your feed. 19-year-old college student Janiyah Watson says she got one of those messages last summer.
Well, I was 100% interested because I'm just like, oh, wow, like it's really my time. Like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be a model.
The person who DM'd Janiyah, who appeared to be a 23-year-old female Instagram user, said they'd send her a few outfits a week and would pay her a couple $100 to post pictures of her wearing the outfits on Instagram. But there was a catch. First, Janiyah needed to send them some money.
So I'm just like, okay, $55 for 6 outfits? That probably would cost like way more.
Right. You're thinking, hey, that sounds good. And then at what point did you start to think, wait, what did I just pay for?
Probably immediately after, because I paid her the $55. I sent her the products I wanted, but she had never asked me for my size. And so that's when, you know, flags kind of started to raise just a little bit. Obviously not enough, but just a little bit.
All in, Janiyah says she paid the person about $70, but never received any products. We reached out to the account that messaged Janiyah, but got blocked. According to the Better Business Bureau, online shopping scams have been on the rise and spiked in 2020 as the pandemic forced more shoppers online.
Tell me how it goes from, hey, I got this comment to, I just lost $100.
That is one of the age-old tactics that scammers will do, and that is building a relationship with their target. We look through the scam tracker and we see different reports of people assuming, hey, you know, I thought I was really somebody's friend, or I really thought I was going to get this great deal of a lifetime, only to find out it wasn't true, or it wasn't what I thought it was.
And Sandra says it's not just money scammers are after. Some will try to steal your credit card information or even your identity.
So what are some ways to avoid being scammed like this?
The biggest way to avoid being scammed is, first of all, protect your identity like it's cash. Secondly, when you receive one of those unsolicited offers, question it. If they're asking you to send money, that is the first telltale sign that it possibly is a scam.
Instagram tells us they're trying to constantly improve their technology to combat new trends and techniques that hackers and spammy accounts may use. Janiyah, who's building her own following on YouTube, says she learned her lesson and now is extra careful when doing any brand partnerships.
So now I actually have like a marketing kit, rate card. I do have a lot of brand ambassadorships, I guess.
And just to be clear, you are getting paid, right?
100%. I am getting paid. I should not have to pay for anything. If you want me to market your product and make a video with your product, not even shipping.
That does it for this. Oh, yeah.
It makes sense because, of course, you know, I'm like a micro influencer, you know, a few hundred, and people are like, want to collab, and I'm like, something smells wrong about this.
Yes, right.
But still, of course, people just want to make a name for themselves.
I agree. I just ignore.
Exactly.
That's my advice.
Exactly.
All right.
Always ignore.
That does it for this hour morning news now.